Going on, guys? So today I wanted to do a video on float and float rotation. Float rotation could be really, really important. And recently I've been posting the float for the stocks in my morning watch list, and I want you guys to know why I'm posting that and how you can use that. There's a reason why I've been posting it because I think it's really important. So I just want you guys to understand how to use it to your advantage. Okay, because in my opinion, it could be a really good indicator for whether a stock is going to be going higher or lower. And I'm going to explain why. So, to understand float rotation, we first have to understand float. Float is the number of shares that are available for trading. Okay, these are freely traded between different investors, traders, whoever. Now, to figure out this number, you have to take the common shares outstanding and subtract owners that are not allowed to freely trade the shares. That means insiders that have to file, or large owners of shares that have like a 10% ownership of the company and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to be using ANY because this was a stock that rotated its float a few times today. Now, let me pull up ANY and their SEC filings. So, we're going to go here. We're going to go to SEC filings. We're going to click on ANY. I'm just going to pull up the 10Q they filed. Now, this number has changed a little bit. It's not perfect, and we're just going to be using common shares outstanding for the simplicity of this video. So I click on the 10Q, and I go down here and I see, okay, ANY has 2 million shares, right? Hopefully you guys can all see that. I'm rounding to make this easier for the video and hopefully easier for you guys to understand. So we got 2 million shares outstanding. Now we know this, and let's just pretend the float is 2 million. It's going to be a little bit less than that because there are more owners of this stock that cannot trade their shares freely. But anyways, we're going to go to the chart now. And we can see this morning ANY went from, it opened 560, now it's trading at 760. That's a really big move. Also note that this stock is way up from like 160. Okay, but let's dive into it a bit. Now, why was this move so big and how did it happen? So ANY rotated its float, and when you rotate your float, that means that all of the shares that are available to be traded freely in a day or in a stock have been traded through. So we can see here that ANY, if I switch this to 10-minute candles, we'll have a better idea. So right here, you can see the volume was 2 million, right? So there was 2 million shares traded in this 10-minute candle. From this move from 650 to 750 that happened in 10 minutes, 2 million shares were traded. That means all of the shares available for trading have been traded in 10 minutes. That's crazy. Okay, let me say that again. All of the shares available to be traded in ANY were traded within 10 minutes. That's showing us that there is tons of demand for this stock today. Okay, this demand is going to fade, but this is a huge tell, right? Even right off the bat, if we, what time, where's 9:30? So 9:30, there was a lot of shares traded, but right here on 1 million shares. So at 10 o'clock, half of the float was traded. That's a massive amount of demand for the stock. So if people want to buy 1 million shares of a stock that only has 2 million shares, that's a lot of demand and a little amount of supply. And when demand over is outnumbered the supply, when there's more buyers than sellers, the stock price is going to move up. Now, I'm saying this, but there also is a way to tell if the float is rotating right? So if all of the shares of the company is rotating, is like being traded, being trading, and the stock is going nowhere, that is a massive tell that the stock is going to likely collapse. And why I say that, most of the time that happens when there's dilution. And dilution is when the company can increase the supply of stock. Or maybe possibly there's a really big seller. Dilution is a much more common uh, thing that we see in trading, but maybe someone's unloading, someone's shorting a ton of shares. We can see the float rotating if they're absorbing all of those shares. Sometimes we will see that too, but we usually see it in dilution, through dilution rather. Okay, so now let me just explain one thing. So when I was discussing ANY this morning, I said float rotation and some other keys to why I would never short ANY today. Um, One of the reasons is float rotation. When the float is being rotated, you have to understand that the average price is just destroyed. Because what happens is people are buying shares, selling shares, maybe the stock goes higher and now they're buying in again, selling in again. There's a lot of trading going on, and what happens is as the float rotates, each time the float rotates and the stock is moving higher, it's now up on air, right? So in this candle, there was the entire float was rotated. The entire stock is now up on air. Now, if you add these candles together, the float was rotated again. So now the average price of people holding is all the way up here, and this is what happens. A big move down creates panic because the average price is all the way up here now, and then you get a big move down. Okay, so these people are now underwater, just like any stock, but when you have the entire float of a stock underwater, it gets very heavy and you get big moves down. Now, saying that, if it recovers and this thing breaks out, now the float, the average price of the float is in here somewhere, or maybe it's still in here, and you get above that, now people want to get back in, and the float keeps rotating, keeps rotating. I've seen the float rotate of a stock maybe 15 times in a day before, probably even higher, honestly. I've seen I don't remember the chart, but I think it was like I can't remember the ticker, but I remember there was a float of 1 million shares one time, and that stock traded like 50 million shares in a day. The stock price went from like $3 to $20, and then the next day it went from $20 to $55, I think. And that means that the float, like I said, it rotates, and now the stock is just up on air. It's purely up on air, and from the average price, there just is a big air pocket, right? Because no one owns it in here, so they all own it up here. When this thing finally collapses, it gets really ugly. Okay, but sometimes what happens is the stock keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher. And I was mentioning that about ANY. If we back this up a little bit, the float of this stock has rotated many times throughout the past couple of days. Uh, so this stock is up, way, way up on air. Now, as supply starts to increase, when they start to dilute, raise money through selling more shares, issuing more shares, this thing is going to tank, and all these people are going to be stuck holding the bag. Now, saying that, that doesn't mean that this stock can't go much, much higher. Okay. And like I said, when this company starts to dilute, we will have a phenomenal short opportunity if you can borrow shares. Because, like I said, what happens is the average price might be $8, and the company now has an offering, and they can sell. What's the market cap on this thing? The market 2 times 14 million. They can dilute maybe a third of that using the shelf. That's what's a third of 14? You're looking at they're going to be able to sell probably like close to $4 million worth of shares. $4 million worth of shares. That's going to be a significant amount of supply. So if they want to be able to uh, really tap into that, that's going to be a lot of shares flooding the supply, which is going to be you're going to need a ton of demand to push the stock higher, and that becomes very unlikely the higher the stock goes. So basically, what I'm trying to get at here is as the stock rotates, as the float rotates, this is traded. ANY has traded 11 million shares today, and if the float is 2 million, that means we've had 5 times the float has rotated. So there's 5 times within this one day that the stock has traded the entire float. That means all the shares that could be traded have been traded 5 times over. Okay? And like I said, that means there was 5 little bubbles basically created in here. Now, some of these bubbles pop, some of them happen again, you don't know. One thing you can look at is the volume weighted average price, but this now gets skewed because we might have had the volume weighted average price, let's see, 2 million shares, about right here. So after this, the average price was 6, but now that the float has been completely rotated, we have all of this. The average price is probably up in here now or up in here. And as the stock climbs, the air bubble gets larger and larger and larger until it pops. Uh, Kind of the same thing was happening with Bitcoin. As Bitcoin was getting more and more eyes on it, more and more demand, Bitcoin's float is only, I think it's like 21 million Bitcoins are available total. So as Bitcoin got higher and higher, the float was actually rotating a lot. And then, as we know, Bitcoin popped, the bubble popped, the air bubble burst, and things get ugly. So basically, I want to warn against chasing this. Now, yes, you can make money. If I'm holding this long, right? If you play this long and that you happen to get in, and the float is rotating, that is a very bullish sign. You do not want to sell your shares. Maybe sell some, sell some, sell some. But if this demand is pumping and still ripping and it's trading 2 million shares, this thing is going to start skipping numbers, guys. I've seen it so many times before. Now, the opposite is true on the reverse. As soon as this average price of the float, whatever the new float is, you're now looking at a bubble that is about to pop, and like this thing went from 820 to 650 and 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 an hour. That's a huge move. And look at from 650 to 750 in another hour. So float rotation is really important. I can try to do another video on it to explain it a little bit better. Some other ideas that I have with float rotation. But overall, float rotation can be an extremely bullish signal or it could be extremely bearish signal, right? If I am looking to short a stock that gaps up and they have a shelf on the table that they are able to tap into, and there's tons and tons of volume pumping, and the stock price is going nowhere, I know as soon as that volume dies, this stock or whatever stock is going to just melt and melt and melt because all of these people that are buying are going to be underwater and they're slowly going to want to sell their shares because they're like, oh, I'm at a loss, sell, I'm at a loss, sell, sell, sell. And those are some of the best fades, some of the best moves if you're a short seller. So I hope this video helps. If you guys like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you're trying to learn more about stocks, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And yeah, just food for thought, something to look for when you're trading these small, low float stocks. this is why people watch them, because if the float starts to rotate, they can run and run and run and run. So just something to look for. Hope you guys like this video. If you do, once again, subscribe to my channel, and I'm going to be posting some more stuff. So hope this video helps. I'm